And now, from the great state of Mississauga in Ontario, Canada, it's the Ted Woloshyn Podcast. Brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's fashion, Tom's Place will suit you. And ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. ETP Canada. And now, here's Ted.
Well, hello, everybody. Once again, thank you so much for being here. Much appreciated. And this week, we're looking forward to this now for the last couple of months. We finally got everything together. My guest this week is one of the most accomplished filmmakers in Canadian film, from The Tempest, which starred Christopher Plummer, to Prosecuting Evil, which explored the atrocities of the Holocaust, and Oscar Peterson, Black and White, a multi-award-winning biography of jazz icon Oscar Peterson. He has made more than 65 award-winning films and documentary and authored 5 books, including his memoir, Moguls, Monsters, and Madmen, An Uncensored Life in Showbiz. Welcome, Barry Avrich. Thank you very much for joining me. It's a pleasure seeing you. How are you?
Couldn't be better. Could be warmer, but I'm good.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I read this recently, and I thought, no, this can't be true anymore, because this article was from a while ago. Are you only sleeping 4 hours a night?
Yes.
Still, you're defying medical knowledge completely.
Apparently, they say that's bad for you. My mother, who passed away a year ago, last week at the age of 95, also slept 4 hours a night or less. And so we would often have conversations at 1, 2, and 3 in the morning. And so we just did not have a great need for sleep. I find it boring.
Well, you know what? There's not uncommon for people not to get enough sleep, or what is a recommended amount of sleep. But that's usually because they have either things on their mind, financial problems within the family, or they've got some sort of chronic pain that keeps them up. But in your case, it's just that you're just so full of energy, I guess.
Yeah, I just find it a waste of time. If I was walking around feeling exhausted and falling asleep at meetings or in front of a camera or something like that, or behind a camera, then it would be a problem. Sleepwalking across the street, it's not an issue, and I'd rather just be more creative and use that time to do the things I like to do.
Mm-hmm. You talk about your mother and your parents, and overall, you had an interesting life, because your parents used to take you both to New York to experience Broadway in the fall, and also to Stratford for the festival each year.
Yes.
Obviously had a huge impact on your career path.
Massive. And it's not like they were show business people or overtly cultural, but they really appreciated entertainment and grew up with it in the Depression era and knew that it was some form of escape. And so they just thought I would enjoy it. And I've been very fortunate in going full circle and starting to see shows on Broadway at a very young age, and then working in New York on many productions. And then Stratford had a whole career in not only doing their marketing for close to 2 decades, but filming over 21 of their productions.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to get to, but since you brought it up, we'll talk about that. Now, you were approached by them to take on this project, which was unique, to say the least, and you did it for over a dozen years. What was the first theatrical presentation that you put on film, and what was the biggest challenge that you found that you weren't ready for?
Well, they threw me to the wolves. So the first production was Anthony Cimolino, who's the will soon departing artistic general director of the Stratford Festival for decades, had a vision to film the entire canon, Shakespeare canon, which is enormous. And I think we're through, me personally, 21, I think a total of 28 other people have done things. So the first production was Caesar and Cleopatra, a Shaw play that Des McAnuff, great Canadian director who had done Tommy and other things, was directing on the stage at Stratford, with Christopher Plummer starring as Caesar, and Nikki James from Broadway, who made her name in a show called The Book of Mormon, and Des had brought her in Cleopatra. And so the chemistry in George Bernard Shaw's fabulous play of Caesar and Cleopatra was such an electric chemistry, and somehow Plummer and Nicky James had the same chemistry that Shaw had, I think, envisioned when he wrote the play. So figuring out how to film it, first time in, many cameras. We had 2 passes at it, a matinee and an evening production. We've since perfected how to do it. But it was very tricky in terms of my vision, in terms of filming it, what Des McAnuff wanted, what Anthony Cimolino, as the head of the whole place, wanted in terms of ensuring that it felt that there was an alchemy of both film and theater in the production, because it was going to be incredibly intimate and seen on the big screen. And then certainly dealing with Christopher Plummer, who was no shrinking violet, as they say. I had worked with him previously on a production of Barrymore that Garth Drabinsky had done on Broadway, so I knew what he was like to work with, and had certainly seen him in my years of wandering the streets in Toronto. But he's tough. Plummer was tough. He knew what he wanted. I was certainly not going to be able to say, give me another take of this, or how about that? He knew the cameras were there, but it was tough, but I loved it. We followed up a year later with The Tempest, again with Christopher Plummer, and he trusted me at that point. We had a lot of fun doing it. Fabulous part. He won a Canadian Screen Award for that, best performance. Amazing. And then went on to do another 19 of them.
And for you had your difficulties, your challenges from your standpoint. What about from the standpoint of the actors, those who are not used to working in front of cameras, but rather spent most of their lives or all of their lives working in live theater? How difficult was a transition was that for them?
It's such a great question. I spent a lot of time with them before meeting with them, and some certainly did have television and film experience. Most did not. And the key lesson instruction to them was to go out on that stage, don't project any less or more because the cameras are there, and forget that the cameras are there. So what we did, Ted, is that we covered the cameras in black fabric and literally put each filmmaker not only dressed in black, but in a tent per se, so that the cameras did not pose a distraction to either the audience that was there, because we filmed every one of them with the exception of maybe 2 with a live audience. So I didn't want a distraction to the actors or to the audience, and then took the red lights off the cameras, so that normally when the cameras, you've given a direction to the camera, to the switcher to shoot, the red light comes on. We got rid of that so that there was no distraction. And we really didn't, they're all such pros at Stratford that they're come out of conservatories, or they're just plain brilliant. So we didn't really have any issues with somebody who was mugging for the camera, as they say, or was a problem. We specifically shot 2 performances to sort of get the best of the quality of each performance. And later on, very technical stuff here, but boring for your audience. Later on, when budgets became tougher, what we ended up doing, we only were able to get 1 pass at the show. So we had to be very good. And keeping in mind, the cameramen and women that I was employing were not able to rehearse any of their moves. And so, we went through major meetings to talk about what the theme of the play was, what Shakespeare intended, where the moments were. But it's pretty much follow the puck. And in fact, a lot of these camera people were people that had taught hockey and whatnot. So it wasn't a question of, okay, camera 2, move to line 6, move to, you had to really have a sense of the show and how to move a lot of the cameras around as a director. And so we ended up only being able to get 1 performance to shoot, but we negotiated for a 3-hour session of pickups, which really worked well because it didn't take any of the energy out of them for a second performance. So I can go back. We kept the audience there. We fed them, gave them cookies and sandwiches, begged them to stay after a break, and they stayed and loved watching the movie making and having great actors like Colin Feore, Martha Henry, Tom Allison, anybody sort of come out and do a line again and then do a pickup. And so we can have those best moments. We found a way to do it efficiently.
Your first experience with film happened when you were at Vanier College back in, I guess, 1980. As I mentioned, you had all these memories and all this experience of seeing theater growing up via your parents. But when it came your turn to be the guy in charge, how did you approach that from a standpoint of not a viewer, but somebody who was producing, not accepting what was being produced?
I'd like to say
in your part at first?
No, I never went into anything nervous. Whatever it will be, it will be. I'd like to say that I was a student of Kurosawa or De Palma or Frankenheimer or Zeffirelli. I watched all of those filmmakers. I could never be that brilliant, but, you got a sense of watching so many films and shows about understanding the structure. I had a very good teacher in Vanier College in Montreal named Bob Deltradici, who said you must look at a film, whether it's a short or a feature, in like a play in 3 acts, and setting it up, some huge crisis in Act 2, and then Act 3, the denouement, the resolve. And so that stayed in my head forever, even in my documentary filmmaking, of saying, all right, in Act 2, what's the problem that we're going to throw at the audience? What's the tension? What's the edge of the seat? I never forgot that, even, as I continued on and as I began. The interesting thing, Ted, was that I think the first film I ever made was that a rabbi had hired me to shoot his daughter's wedding and edit it. And what he really wanted was just for me to film it and give him a copy of the tape. But I went in and cut the whole thing and cut out boring sections and added more music and visuals and dramatic effects and close-ups. And I went to show it to his house. I'll never forget this. And he was horrified. It's like, where's this part? Where's that part? And what the hell is this? And where did that come from? Horrified. And I learned the lesson of Final Cut and what that meant. It didn't discourage me, but then continued making, while I was in college, crazy short films and had a lot of fun cutting film, Super 8 film myself, and learning the practice. And my father, and I wrote about this, but my father, who was not in the film industry, but knew pacing and knew a sense of that the world has attention deficit syndrome, and would take me to movies, and he'd say, watch the audience, not the film. Yeah. If someone's looking at, there were no phones then, but if somebody's looking at their watch or, just distracted, then you've lost them. So many times when I have a cut of a project, I will get a theater together with an audience and watch them and see where I'm losing them.
That's quite fascinating. I mean, it's not a good way to go about becoming a reviewer, though. How was the film? I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you how the audience was.
Well, it's true. I'm hoping that by the time it gets to a reviewer, that it's in better shape the first cut.
Do you have a preference between documentaries and film, feature film?
Well, I've never done a feature film. I've written
scripts. Do you have a preference as a viewer?
Oh, geez, no. I like both if they're done well. I see everything as much as I can, but I'm a very different person in that I believe in making films, whether they're documentaries or feature films, for what I think an audience will enjoy versus what I'll enjoy. The length of films today is appalling. Does The Brutalist need to be 3 hours and have an intermission?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a sensational piece of filmmaking. And I think a lot of times filmmakers, whether it's documentary or feature, are making films for themselves versus what the audience wants. And I've always been very commercial, which is probably one of the reasons why I'm totally unaccepted as a filmmaker in Canada. And I'm okay with that. But I want to make films for people to be entertained. And that's why the running time and the pacing and what I think is commercial works.
The 65 plus films and documentaries that you've done, how many of them came up from you, or how many were your decision? How many did you say, I want to do this? And how many were suggestions that were brought to your table?
95% are what I want to make, based on, again, whether I think that there's a market to sell it. It's very hard today. That's another podcast in terms of documentary selling films. What the streamers and the broadcasters want has changed dramatically, but the majority of it is stuff that I want to make because I'm going to be passionate. But that doesn't mean that I have to be passionate. It doesn't mean that people haven't brought me, great ideas. Made You Look is an art fraud doc that I'm very proud of. That my friend Jay, was an art collector, brought me the story. And there's been other films I've made that have been commissions or suggestions, but mostly stuff I want to make.
The Made You Look is coming out. Will be published, I guess, this summer.
No, Made You Look is it been out. It's on Netflix in the United States and CBC Gem in Canada. That's come out. My most current film, Born Hungry, about a young Indian child that's left homeless in India and then becomes one of the top chefs based in Toronto. That's out right now on Crave.
The book, The Devil Wears
Yes.
Roscoe, that's based on the book, the film Made You Look, right?
Made You Look was a film, and then I've
Yeah.
written a book called The Devil Wears Roscoe. That is coming out in June.
Right.
Ted Woloshyn returns in a moment.
The Boxing Day sale at Tom's Place just never ends. Hey, it's Ted Woloshyn for Tom's Place. You know, we love bringing you incredible Boxing Week deals, even into January. We're here for you every day, and more importantly, on sale each and every day. Call us at 416-596-0297 or check online at toms-place.com for all the deals about our specials and hours. We're fully stocked, and the deals are simply amazing, with prices even lower on shirts, sweaters, pants, coats, sports jackets, suits, and more. Prices you won't believe, like top designer Ted Baker suits, made in Italy and Canada, regularly $900 to $1,100, are now an incredible $500. Visit us and shop the deals at Tom's Place Extended Boxing Week Sale. It's happening right now in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place, we're ready to suit you.
Now back to Ted Woloshyn.
You know, one of the things that you talk about, and I've talked to a number of people about this, even just recently, one of my guests, about when you have the opportunity to meet these fascinating people, extremely successful people, many of which, you know, you admire. The problem is, the good news is you get to meet them. The bad news is that they might not be the same person that you want them to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. That happens.
Yeah. What do you
Quite
do
often.
if you're about to do a documentary on someone and that you really admire, and then you meet them for the first time or the first couple of times, and you think, you know, this guy is just so full of himself. I don't know if I can go on with this project.
I've had that. I've had that on several occasions. One, I ended up making a film about that person because I kept saying no, and then found a relationship and a way in to that person and that person's flaws and insecurities that he was prepared to reveal to me in the film, and so I agreed to move forward with it. Another person who shall remain nameless is a well-known Canadian singer who I did some test filming with and spent time with, and I said to myself, I just can't do it. It's not that this person didn't have an extraordinary career. It's not that this person wasn't a good storyteller. I just felt that there was no depth to this person, and emotional, not empathy is the wrong word, but just no architecture of any kind of emotive level in them. So I passed. Like you, I've interviewed hundreds of people, and I always look for the most entertaining side of them that I can find, and the most revealing. Some are great interviews, some are not, as you know. But I tend to do a lot of research before going in, so I could find a way to get to them. I don't know how many times in documentaries I'll have people's teams, the celebrity publicists, the bane of my existence, say you've got 10 minutes, and 10 minutes is turned into an hour just because you found the chemistry.
These people who put these rules out, these publicists and these management teams, so to speak, I wonder if they've ever been on the other end of the microphone where somebody says, okay, you've got 11 minutes to do this interview, whether they have any idea what that means in the real world. Sometimes it takes 11 minutes to warm up to somebody before you can get into any kind of real question and answer situation.
Well, you know, this world of the soundbite and shows like, I mean, the beauty of podcasts, yours and Conan O'Brien's, which is really, really good, is that it's brought back the talk show, which broadcasters do not want. They think audiences don't want it. They do. They want inside. And the publicists are there to do a job. They think they're doing a job by protecting the talent and being a gatekeeper. And that's fine. What bothers me is that quite often I will meet a celebrity somewhere and they will tell me they never even got the request and they would have loved to sit down for a specific project. And I understand how much the publicist has to decide, especially if you're an A-lister, how much they can bring to you. But if I were a Miss or an A-lister, I'd be saying, I don't care. Bring it all to me, and I will highlight what I want to.
You had a unique experience as a documentarian, doing a documentary about somebody that you once worked for. That person, of course, being Garth Drabinsky. Let's go back to when you first met Garth, and your agency was doing all the ads for him for Live Ent and for Cineplex, and then shuffle forward to where you're now doing a story about him, or you're doing his story.
It's even before that, Ted. So interestingly enough, I had a friend that worked for Cineplex Odeon Films, and we happened to be out for dinner, my friend and I. I knew who Garth Drabinsky was. Wasn't working for him at the time, and certainly he was Canada's, most powerful entertainment mogul at the time. And he came into the restaurant and saw this friend of mine who works for him and offered to take us on a tour of the Pantages Theater, which he was building or renovating at the time for Phantom of the Opera. It was a movie theater, and he was going to turn it into a theater. He had not yet lost the Cineplex empire and started live entertainment. So he offered to take us on a hard hat tour of the theater, and I was mesmerized watching him. He was a great salesman and brilliant marketer, and his vision for restoring this 1920s era theater was spectacular. And I was very excited. I had seen, when he took over that movie theater, which is a famous story of from blocking famous players and owning half the block and forcing them out. Great story, great business story. And so I was aware of him. So so that's where my first encounter with him was something in awe. Fast forward maybe a year and a half later, he lost Cineplex. The ad agency that had handled Cineplex was now going to follow him across the street, literally, to his new offices and be the ad agency for something called Live Entertainment Corporation of Canada, his theater Act Two part. And the owner of the ad agency came at me and said, you need to come and work on this business for me. I had been handling the Mirvish's business and had just done Les Mis and Miss Saigon in terms of the marketing. So I jumped at the chance to go and work on this piece of business because it's Garth Drabinsky, and he had huge visions for Phantom and all kinds of things. So my first meeting with him was in these sort of awful temporary offices where he was in his brain calculating a 12-market tour of Phantom of the Opera by each market by gross based on ticket prices, whether it's in Regina, Edmonton, Vancouver, Alaska, and he can compute the entire gross of the tour in his head. And he looked at me, and he didn't even know me, but he looked at me and he said, focus. He was a human calculator, incredible. And then for the next 15 years, I was his guy in developing all of his creative on his many shows at Live Entertainment. Live Ent, as it became from, at the time, Phantom of the Opera, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of commercials for that, Showboat, Ragtime, Joseph, and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And he was the best client because he just pretty much, if I can be creative, and he appreciated the filmmaker in me and cutting movie trailers for Broadway shows that had never been done, and celebrity voices, James Earl Jones for the voice of Showboat, and Jack Palance, the voice of Ragtime, and on and on and on. And so he just, as tyrannical and awful as he was as a business CEO, as a leader of a company, awful to people, I got the best of it because he just pretty much let me do what I needed to do creatively as long as he was happy. And so it was incredible education. Bad ending, incredible education.
Yeah, I was going to say his ending, many people thought it was greed that brought him down, but you don't believe that at all. Because if it was greed, he would have come down earlier in different ways.
Wasn't greed. I mean, he certainly liked a good lifestyle, but it's not like he was, there were bank accounts filled with cash. He was certainly living high, but I think he was just this insane, insecure gambler that just wanted to succeed and kept moving the chips on it. You can imagine a roulette green and moving it from red to black, that pile of chips, each time hoping to score big and be seen as this brilliant producer bringing these ethereal important pieces to the public. It wasn't good enough for him to be tremendously successful and rich on productions of Phantom of the Opera and Joseph of the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which were off-the-shelf productions that he had licensed from Andrew Lloyd Webber. But he wanted important pieces, and he did some phenomenal work. So I don't think it was greed; it was desperation to be accepted, and a lot of delusion in terms of what he thought the public wanted. He would take shows to Minneapolis and say it'll run for 14 weeks when nothing in Minneapolis had ever run longer than 10 days because it looked good on paper. He felt he knew more than the public.
You went to see him after he was incarcerated, I guess, at a prison out near Gravenhurst in northern Ontario. What was that like?
I had only been to prison to visit somebody once before, and it was Peter Demeter, I was still alive, a legendary person convicted for hiring someone to murder his wife. And then I got a light sentence and was sent back for arson and some other attempted nonsense. And I was doing a documentary on Eddie Greenspan, famous criminal attorney.
Right.
And so I went film Demeter in jail and near Kingston in some institution called Bath. And it was harrowing to be up close with a person with dead eyes and frightening.
Yes.
Going to see God. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I guess, I can imagine what it'd be. You're looking at a stone cold killer, really, and thinking, this is got to give you the creeps, man.
Well, I remember when I asked Peter Demeter, whose wife was found slaughtered in their garage next to a Cadillac. And I remember saying to him, how did you feel when you walked in and saw the blood all over the garage floor and on the car? And he said, well, all I could think of was that a good set of tires were ruined.
Wow.
Nice.
So now you go see your pal Garth Drabinsky. It's not the same story, but again, it is somebody that is in prison for something they did wrong.
That jail was a country club. There were no electrified fences or cells. He lived in a cottage with other inmates and was able to walk around and wander around in casual clothing. And as long as you didn't cross certain lines, you were, sort of free in that wooded Muskoka environment. But going there was very, very sobering to see him come out. I was asked to bring a baggie with loose coins for the vending machine to buy him popcorn and chocolate bars. And, seeing the once great theater producer who had traveled all over the world. I traveled all over the world with him in private planes and the best of everything. And, in jail was something. But he hadn't changed. I mean, he'd asked to see me because he had heard I was making a film about him. And Garth, being someone that liked to control everything and was used to having the final cut on everything, whether it be a book about his life or his own productions, wanted to try to have the final cut on this documentary and was saying, don't make it. I have another act. And at the same time was intensely curious as to who I got to be in the film and very excited that I'd, gotten some major stars to be in it that had worked with him. Other people he wasn't so happy about. The film was going to have its world premiere at the Toronto Film Festival. James Earl Jones had come in. Elaine Stritch, the best, who had Showboat, was coming in for the opening. He was very upset. He had not seen the film because he was still in jail and threatened the Toronto Film Festival if they did screen it. He was unhappy with the way the film festival is a giant catalog that comes out that describes the film. And he was unhappy the way he was characterized in the film. I don't know whether they'd called him in the book, whether they called him a thief or a crook, and he threatened to sue the film festival. They were very nervous about this, and we're on the cusp of pulling the film because they were afraid of Garth and his potential litigious nature, even though he was in jail. And I indemnified them from anything, and then they agreed to change the language of how he was described in the online version of the book, even though he wanted the whole book reprinted, which was never going to happen. So we had our world premiere, and he claims to this day, never spoke to me again, said I was duplicitous. He claims to this day that he's never seen the film, which is complete nonsense. Of course he's seen it. And the film was the most balanced. His own ex-wife and daughter came to the opening at the Toronto Film Festival and sent me a note loving it.
Wow. We have in this country such a great history of comedic talent and have for years and years. You've had the opportunity to sit down and speak with a number of them. And I'm talking about Howie Mandel, David Steinberg, just to name a couple right now. Is there a theme that runs through Canadian comedy or comedians, a commonality?
To me, the theme of the ones I've worked with, from David Steinberg to Norm Macdonald to Howie Mandel to Marty Short, who I love, is that there's not enough. Yes, the theme is they left. They all left Canada. Eugene, who has stayed, made Toronto his home and continues to work here, and in the U.S. as well, Eugene Levy. The theme is that they've all left. The theme also is the fact that there's just not been enough development of comedy in Canada through the broadcasters and the streamers to develop and write great comedy for these actors. There's certainly been Canadian sitcoms, Schitt's Creek, and there's been some others as well that have done well, but you can only name a handful of them, and I think that's a great crime, and that there needs to be comedy labs that are set up to develop the more comedy in this country, so that not only do we keep some of the good ones that are coming up now, but attract them to come back.
I don't understand what would be the hesitancy on the part of the industry here to stay away from that when you've had so many great successes, international successes. I mean, SCTV.
Well, the writing, and so it is bringing back. It's knowing who the great comedy writers are, Canadians, and also the rules that we have in terms of CanCon. So, what if you had an American comedy writer working with a Canadian comedy writer developing things? What if? So it becomes a whole tax credit issue in our world of working with non-Canadians. I think there's an opportunity to work with the best and develop, and it's the investment. The networks and the streamers want sure things. And there are some examples of some good writing that's been happening. And at the same time, there's a low tolerance for risk and far less opportunity out there to develop stuff. My producing partner, Mark Selby, and I are developing a program now to bring comedic or comedy writers in to start to create a lab to develop pitches for interesting sitcoms, because it's this country, we've got a lot of funny people. We grow funny people. It's a ridiculous, funny situation. We're funny as Canadians in the environment that we have to live in. There's comedy here, and so why aren't we doing it?
Well, that's what I'm wondering. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I understand from a financial standpoint of view that there are hurdles that are unachievable, and I guess that's probably one of the big reasons why there's a lack of. I mean, we should be overflowing in sitcoms and in comedy films from this country. Lord knows if we pulled every Canadian out of the United States who works in the field of comedy, there would be a vacuum there.
Tons. There's just not enough opportunities to write and develop. I mean, I'd like to be optimistic and think that the talent is here, but, we've become known for very dark films. And occasionally there is a comedy chestnut, but not many.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your work in raising money for the Sick Kids Hospital and specifically the Daniels Hollywood Theater, which began back in 2007, I think. How did you come to be part of that?
I'm a terrible person in terms of visiting people in hospitals. I've just never been. I'm uncomfortable going in them. I'm nauseous immediately. I can't even drive down University Avenue in Toronto without being nauseous. I'm just not good. And I went to visit someone and I saw a young child with in those days, a DVD player on his little chest trying to watch a movie. And that's not how movies should be seen. Yeah. So I wrote this fabulous person at Sick Kids who I didn't even know. And I said, look, I have an idea. I want to build a movie theater in a hospital and you've got 24 hours to say yes or no. And she called me. She was really arrogant. Why 24 hours? I said, I just don't want to deal with the committee. I will raise the money and I will get this done. And if you don't like it, then I'm going to go across the street to Sinai with this idea. But I want it to be done. And I think it should be done in Sick Kids. I think kids should have an opportunity to escape within a hospital and see a movie the way it should be seen. she said, all right, well, I want 24 hours too. And she came back and she said, here are the conditions that, go ahead. We have an existing space that will need to be gutted and renovated. And if you can work within that space, then go ahead. And then secondly, we want, a lot of the sick kids are very sick and can't make it down to the theater. So we want to make sure that it's, in those days, whatever the word for fiber was, that it's somehow connected to all the rooms so that they can watch whatever movie you're screening for the kids that can make it. So that's what we did. We brought the best exhibition people that we can find from California to help build the theater, raised the money in a week, and opened the theater with, thanks to Jeff Katzenberg, with a copy of Shrek 3, I think. And the theater's still there. That building is going to be torn down, and a couple of years ago, I raised another $5 million to rebuild the theater in what will be the new tower.
Mm-hmm. Has this been duplicated in other hospitals, or had it been done in other hospitals prior to you doing it?
No. I mean, since then, there's been some in Toronto. Baycrest put a theater in. The notion of the theater in a hospital, there's been spaces, but it's been mainly used as academic desks and for teaching and things like that, but not as a beautifully outfitted movie theater. So I appreciate the fact that they need to use it for other things.
Of all the people that you've interviewed for your documentaries, was there anybody that sticks out as being somebody that you didn't expect them? And I'm thinking in a positive way here. I don't want you to slam anybody, because that's not your style anyway. But is there anybody that you thought, wow, this person is like 5 times more fascinating than I thought they were, or 5 times kinder or more interesting, or in any way were you taken aback?
I mean, Celine Dion, but I was not surprised. I had worked with her many years ago on several occasions and just found her to be the most sincere, genuine person. So continue to love her. I think if anybody who surprised me, I would probably say Quincy Jones. Mm-hmm. I've interviewed him on numerous occasions. He became a good friend. And this was somebody that was more interested in hearing your story than telling you his. And he just would find a way to get into your world and cover you in a warm blanket. I remember visiting him after going through a difficult situation, and he just I had only met him a couple of times, but I went to his house and we were talking, and he just literally held me and said, don't you understand that you can't have a beautiful picture without the negative? Fabulous line. I will never forget him. Robert Evans, all kinds of people. Been very fortunate.
I look at the list and I think to myself, okay, there's a theme here. This is, a lot of these people are show business people, whether it be our own Oscar Peterson, Michael Cohl, of course, who started CPI and was responsible for the Stones tours for many, many years. David Steinberg, as you mentioned, Howie Mandel. And then I look at a name that jumps off the page, and I think to myself, what? Rocket Richard. And I'm thinking, Rocket Richard? How does Rocket Richard fit in with all these Hollywood stars and moguls? And I think, wow, Barry's from Montreal.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. I'm trying to remember the film, Ted. I should have been better prepared. I was working on a film for Alliance, and it was a Rocket Richard feature film with a French actor playing Rocket Richard. And they asked me to do a short documentary on Rocket Richard that would accompany this film. And so I had literally 2 brushes with him, one for that. And then years later, I was working for AMC movie theaters, and they were building a new movie theater in what was the old Montreal Forum. And I bought 6 Montreal Forum seats to be installed in that movie theater, and went to see Rocket. He was not well, and got him to sign the seats.
What did you think of his steely eyes? I once asked Johnny Bauer who the most frightening person he ever saw coming toward his net with a puck on a stick was, and he looked at me without hesitation. He said, Rocket Richard. The look
he
in
was
his
in failing health, so I just felt a lot of sympathy and wishing him well at that point. The eyes were no question. I was aware of them, but they certainly didn't have the same effect as you're describing of somebody coming down that ice with 100 miles an hour.
Yeah. Is there anybody that you wanted to talk to, anybody you wanted to feature but couldn't get the okay?
Sinatra, but I had met him and had a couple of experiences with him. I would have loved to sit down and do the definitive interview with him. Tony Bennett, again, I worked with him endlessly. I would have liked to film him. Streisand, I did work with. I did want to make the documentary about her life and was a contender. She chose another director, an American with a political leaning that I think she'd find attractive versus a Canadian. So Some of them you have to let go.
Yeah. Anybody right now on the horizon that we might see pop up on a screen in front of your lens?
I'm working with Bruce Springsteen this week on a project, so I'm looking forward to filming him.
Wow. Now, there's a fascinating guy.
The best.
Yeah. I think he and of people on, I guess, our generation, musically speaking, Billy Joel would be one as well. I remember reading recently that
I shot Billy. I shot Billy for the Oscar Peterson film, and of course went to his team right away, and they had already done a deal with PBS and American Masters to do Billy's story, which is being edited as we speak, and it will be a great one. It's such a great story.
I look forward to your book's out in June of this year.
Yes,
and the next documentary, the next piece of film work would be when?
I hope the fall. It's an incredible political thriller called Out of Nowhere. I'm hoping that's in the fall. We'll see. But Born Hungry is on Crave as we speak, and the Devil Wears Rothko book out in June.
Good stuff. Congratulations on everything you've done in the past, and best of luck in the future. And once again, thanks so much, Barry, for taking the time.
Ted, an honor. I remain a great fan. You are an iconic Canadian broadcaster, so this is an honor for me.
So kind of you to say that. I mean that. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, sir. Take care.
That's going to do it for another episode of the Ted Woloshyn podcast. Don't forget to check on our website, www.tedwoloshyn.ca. You can pick up on all the past podcasts that we have done. We're on YouTube now as well. Don't forget to drop by YouTube and check out our channel and subscribe. It's absolutely free. And of course, as usual, while you're online, fill out your organ and tissue donation card. You can change or even save a life. In the meantime, have a great week.
The Ted Woloshyn podcast has been brought to you by Tom's Place. For the finest in men's clothing at unbeatable prices, it's Tom's Place at 190 Baldwin in the heart of Kensington Market. Tom's Place will suit you. And ETP Canada, providing estate administration with ease. Technical production by Paul Gatt. Music by Bike Thieves. For more on this podcast and our sponsors, and to talk to Ted, go to www.tedwoloshyn.ca.